video interview series with the experts we've assembled at the Apache Spark Maker Community event. I have with me today Jennifer Shin, who is well known and well respected as an expert in data science. Jennifer, you want to say a little bit about yourself?
I'm the Senior Principal Data Scientist at Nielsen Company. I also have a startup called APath Solutions, where I'm the Chief Data Scientist there. I have research in electronic health records, looking at medical models, statistics models, as well as consulting projects at some of the Fortune 100 companies.
What kind of projects are you working now in terms of projects that involve open source tools like Hadoop and Spark and R? Are you heavily involved?
Spark has been growing increasingly popular among, I think, clients. I think most people are not familiar with it. I think Hadoop has become more popular now. People are starting to try to use Hadoop for analytic purposes. So I think it's up and coming. I think a lot of businesses are really interested in it, but it's probably slower than, say, R relative. I mean, R has been around a little bit longer, and so I think most people are still on R, still trying to work with R, and it's kind of getting to the place where they can start using Spark.
Can you give us a sense for how open source tools might be useful for advanced visualization and the kind of work that you do?
You have to have the right tools, right? So open source is great because it allows you to be able to find the right solution without spending a lot of money, which can be a bottleneck for most projects. So especially with visualizations, depending on what type of visualization you're doing, open source tools become very important. You need to usually do some sort of ETL, you need to do some sort of transformation of data before you visualize it. And so for that reason, having open source tools are very important.
Do you feel that someone needs an advanced degree to be an applied mathematician to be an effective data scientist, or can any smart person teach themselves the tools and the techniques of this field and be effective in a business context? Give me your real honest opinion on that.
So I have an undergraduate degree in economics, mathematics, and creative writing. Math is a very big part of what I do.
Yeah.
I think it depends. I think you can be a applied data scientist and work at a company and specialize in a niche field within data science and be a real big expert on, say, that sort of data, what you're working with, or a certain tool. But if you really want to be a data scientist in like the truest sense, right, where all these fields overlap and be able to have a diverse background and be able to work with any sort of data and come up with better solutions. I think that quantitative background is really important because how else will you know which model is better? How do you quantify something no one else has quantified before if you don't have that sort of experience and expertise and that training to be able to go, I'm going to create a new model and I'm going to tell you why exactly and pinpoint exactly why it's a better model.
You're what's often referred to as a unicorn because many companies are looking for people as well-rounded as you. Obviously, one needs to spend years and a lot of money getting this kind of training, but also someone needs to be a particular type of person who is a polymath in many ways. Do you feel that to be effective, a data scientist needs to be a polymath of sorts?
I think you can be in a certain field and not necessarily be in a niche in that field.
Yeah.
For instance, you can be in biology and work with all sorts of biology data sets and not necessarily work on just healthcare, not necessarily work on just like say diabetes models or certain specific models. However, I think you do need to have some sort of diverse background, whether it be across industries or within your industry, within your field. I think that's really important. It's been my experience, because I started doing this stuff before data science was a term. Like I did an NSF grant proposal in 2010 talking about infinite data sets and how you can use math to solve that problem. To which the NSF basically said, no one cares about this math. It's funny enough. Of course, last year I spoke at an NSF workshop at the ICERM in Brown University. The reality is I've learned a lot of things that I've learned through actually working with data and having to learn it. Right? No one actually wants to sit there and study as much as I have probably. But when you're trying to make a living and you're trying to be a consultant and trying to work with data and no one's created the right tools for it, no one can check it. I mean, you kind of have to learn to program. You have to learn to be able to kind of be quick about it and figure out solutions that maybe other people haven't figured out yet. You do need to have, I guess, a predisposition or a propensity to actually want to learn these things.
You need to be a passionate explorer, but an explorer who's adept and really loves exploring in this ocean of data, finding patterns that are not obvious. Sounds like you're possessed by that passion.
Possessed is probably the right word. I mean, I often tell people, I don't want to necessarily be a data scientist. You just kind of are a data scientist. You just can't help but look at that data set and go, I feel like I need to look deeper. I feel like that's not the right fit. So actually, I do a talk where I actually pick out visualizations that were from the 1800s, where they actually did the same thing that I did. And the difference was I had technology, so I didn't have to go plot it by hand, right? I didn't have to run a big piece of paper. And the way I explained it is, what's the difference between 200 years ago versus now? Well, there's no way I could fit all of that data that I fit into one sheet of paper back then. Like you'd have to have rolls and rolls and rolls of paper. And actually, at some point, I did buy a giant roll of paper because I thought I'd have to do it by hand. So I think that's one of the big differences. I think the methodologies and just having logic being a very important part of it.
Yeah.
Being able to come up with sort of how do you actually characterize a problem and put it into a formula.
Yeah.
Being able to do that is still as important as it was back then. It's just now we have technology to kind of help us, but also that requires us to learn it.
But it's all part of the same continuum. You're discovering patterns that couldn't otherwise be discovered.
I mean, I still rely on I think sort of my instincts, and
Yeah.
I think people call it like the art of it, but I don't. I think it's a little it's a misnomer, right? The art of it is not oh, I just had this great idea and I want to just explore it. I think the art of science is really being able to have certain skills, and being able to recognize things because you have those skill sets.
Yeah.
Right. And the art of it is that you don't. It's like engineering, really. Like you're just not sure what the solution is going to look like, so there's
Yeah.
no blueprint. But you definitely need the skills to be able to even get there and you come up with a solution. So
Yeah.
it's not like the same. I think people think it's like art, like you can just come up with an idea and that's
No.
it. But I think in reality, when you're talking about, especially with data, there's it's a fine line, right? There's some creativity in it, so it looks like an art, but in actuality, it's a lot of skill that you need.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. What do you want to learn today here at this event? What are you passionate about? Tools, techniques, technologies, cloud services?
I think I'm far more interested in just seeing what people are doing.
Yeah.
I think what industry is doing. There seems to be a little bit of stabilization across, the tools that are out there for data science, and sort of general acceptance by the data community for certain tools. Spark being a very
Yeah.
big example of that. So I think for that reason, I'm kind of curious to see how people are using it, how people want to actually develop it, as well as what kind of what products are they building? What are they actually utilizing their data for? I think it's kind of important to know in data science because it gives you a knowledge base to go back to and go, oh, I know someone who's doing something similar to what I'm doing. Let me look up that tool that they mentioned.
Right.
So I think really just learning about what people are working on and what data scientists are doing.
We've published many of Jennifer's blogs and articles on IBM Data Mag and IBM Big Data and Analytics Hub, and her stuff is among the best. We're glad to have you at the event.
Thank you very much.